Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of combining images. If you haven't watched part 1, go ahead and make sure you do that before you watch this one, because I'm going to be referring to some stuff that we learned in that video without much explanation. So today I'm going to talk about how to add some extra details to your combined images. And this is stuff that will just help with the believability that you are, in fact, in Paris. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, so I realized that for this part of the demo, I was going to need a new photograph because something I wanted to show you was how to add shadows. In the first image, if you remember, it's a fairly gray day. It's a gray. I had the picture taken on a gray day. I put myself into a gray photograph in front of the Louvre. And so there was really no reason for shadow. And in fact, here, maybe I'll just open that back up so that you can see that as a reminder. So here's the first combined image that I did. And the other reason that there's not really a need for shadow is that you can't see where the shadow would be. You can kind of see some very faint shadows being cast here, but I'm not in a position in the photograph that would cause any reason to make a shadow. So, this was a very simple combining of images. But there are some photographs where the light is a little bit more high key, it's more high contrast, and there is a shadow produced. So if you've produced a shadow in the photograph of yourself, or if you've produced a shadow in the photograph of yourself, then you're going to want to look for a photograph of Paris where it is bright sun, and where there are shadows being cast, and you want to pay attention to which direction the shadows are being cast in, right? So this shadow is being cast to my right in the photograph, but it's going to the left. And it's also slightly behind me, which means that the sun is hitting me from up above and from this direction, and a little bit from the front, okay? So what I've discovered in trying to find a matching background for this image is that it's really hard to find an image. So don't rush through finding your background image, because that's what's going to really, really help make this believable, is that you've got a background image that really is going to work with the photograph of yourself and the photograph of your classmate. This is a really challenging assignment. Again, as I was going through this again for the demo, I was just reminded of how challenging this is. So you'll notice as we've been looking at this, I've got my marching ants, so I've already got myself selected. And then after, I don't know, 2 hours of searching, I finally found this photograph. I don't know this person, I don't know these children, and I took this off of a travel blog. As I was searching, I started getting more specific in my searches. So instead of just typing in Paris, I was typing in Paris vacation photographs. And then I found myself looking through a bunch of travel blogs, and this is where I found this photograph. And so I'm going to just going to add myself in to their family vacation photograph. And so I have copied myself out of the other photograph, and I'm going to paste myself here. Remember that you want to double check the image size. So you're going to go to image and image size. So you're just going to double check that your resolution is at 300. And if it's not, make sure that all three of these things are connected before you change it, okay? Mine is already set to 300. I lucked out. I'm gonna go ahead and say okay. And I'm going to paste, whoops, what's happening? Oh, I see. Hang on. And I'm going to paste myself. I'm not going to paste myself. Well, fortunately, I already pasted myself earlier, and so pretend like I just went to edit and paste. And, you know, again, I was looking mostly at the light here, but just because the light matches doesn't mean that it's looking believable yet. It still looks kind of a little bit off. And some reasons for that are that the background image has a little bit, it's a little bit more saturated. It is slightly cooler, and it is slightly more green. So what I did was I went ahead and made these adjustment layers, and we talked the other day about making an adjustment layer and using, I think we talked about levels. So I've gone ahead and I made an adjustment layer with levels, and that's starting to get it a little bit closer. And then I made an adjustment using the hue and saturation, and that looks even better. I desaturated it just a tad. And then I went in and I did this curves adjustment layer. The curves adjustment layer, don't be afraid of. And again, you can see it's a very, very, very subtle difference. But I'm gonna go ahead and open this up and show you what's happening here. Curves also affects your highlights and your shadows and your midtones, but it affects the different color channels as well. So you can actually come in here to where it says RGB, and you can affect just the reds of your image. So that's going to just show me the red curve. And if you grab onto the middle, you'll find that it gets really red, and the opposite of red is green. I'm going to bring it back to about where it was. And if you grab onto the top, it'll adjust the reds in the highlights. And if you grab onto the bottom, it adjusts the reds in the shadows, okay? Any adjustment that you're making here should be really, really subtle. You might want to take it to the extreme so that you can really see what it's doing, but then take it down, you know, take it back down to its subtleness, all right? Now, to get into what we are here for today is talking about shadows. I mean, this was just a little bonus, kind of reviewing these. Again, all of your adjustment layers are up here, and don't be afraid to play with them. You know, see what happens if you add a brightness contrast adjustment layer. The beautiful thing about an adjustment layer is that you can always, if you decide you don't like it, you can grab onto it and you can just drag it into the little trash can at the bottom of your layers palette. And another beautiful thing about the adjustment layers is that you can come back in and you can double click on the icon that is for that adjustment. Double click on it, it brings you back to your window where it's saved the adjustments that you've made, but you could go in and say, oh no, wait, I do need to make the shadows a little bit darker. And when you press that, it goes back, disappears, but all the information is here. Remember too, these little arrows pointing down, I made that happen by holding down the Option key or the Alt key. And when you do that, it is going to affect only the layer directly below it. Now, because I want these ones to continue to affect the layers just below them, I'm going to go ahead and give them their arrows again too. And one last thing, I guess, that since we're in this adjustment layer thing, don't forget that you can turn off your eyeballs and you can kind of see, wow, did that really make a difference? And I don't know if you'll be able to see this on your school. You can definitely see that. So like, oh my gosh, yeah, look at how washed out it looks before. But now that I've added that adjustment layer, it really pops and looks a lot better. Okay, so now you'll notice that the family has a shadow over here, but I'm kind of floating because I'm not grounded by any sort of shadow. There are a couple different ways you can put a shadow in. A quick and dirty way is to just use the burn tool over here. And if you've ever taken a darkroom photography class, that'll be a familiar term to you. What it's going to do is it's going to increase the exposure in a specific area and therefore making it darker. Now you want to make sure you're on the layer that you want to affect. So I'm going to go here to my background layer, and just to be safe, I'm going to make a copy of that background layer. You can see I already have one here, but that's because that's my final version that I'm going to show you in the end. I did this cooking show style where I've got, this is my my delightful dish that's waiting in the oven for me to pull out and show you at the end of the demo. But to make a copy of the background, you can just drag that onto the new layer button at the bottom. There are a couple other ways to do that too. So if you come up with another way to make a copy, totally cool. With the burn tool, you can adjust the brush size. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to just start kind of scribbling over. And you can see it's giving me a dark spot there, but it in no way matches this shadow. And this shadow is really a crisp outline of the people. So the burn tool would be a good option if you have a sort of diffused lighting situation and there are just soft shadows, or if you've plopped somebody onto a sidewalk and it just, for some reason, it looks like they're floating. You can just use the burn tool just very lightly underneath their feet, and it's going to ground them. It's going to make them look like they're standing on the ground. With the burn tool, you've got a couple different things you can play with. Up here in your sub menu, you can affect your shadows, your midtones, or your highlights, and you can adjust the exposure. So the higher the exposure, the more extreme it's going to be, and vice versa. The lower the exposure, the longer you're going to have to go. Now, I don't want all of this stuff, and so I could just step backwards, edit, step backwards, edit, step backwards, or the keyboard shortcut is Command-Alt-Z. Or if I've really gotten like way too far out of hand, I can just delete that copy of a background layer that I made and just start again. So once again, I'm going to make another copy of my background layer, and I'm going to talk about how to make this more defined shadow. I want to make a shadow that is kind of in the shape of my person. So what I want to do is I want to get those marching ants around myself again. There's a quick and easy way to do this. I don't have to reselect myself. I can bring my cursor over the thumbnail that is the layer that I am in, and I can hold the Apple key or the Command key and click, and it brings those marching ants back. Now, I don't actually want to do anything in this layer. I want to make a new layer that is just for my shadow. So I'm going to make a new blank layer, paying attention to where it is here. I want it to be right on top of the background. So I made sure that the background copy was still selected when I made that new layer. Now, there's nothing in it, but I have the marching ants that are in the shape of my person. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use the paint bucket tool. And I'm going to, so that you can see it, I'm going to turn off the layer that I'm in, and you can see the marching ants are still there. And I'm gonna fill those marching ants with my paint bucket. Now, that's maybe not quite the right color for a shadow, but I can tell you that shadows are not, they're not, they're not black, they're not gray, they have some color to them. They're not achromatic. So you may, you know, I can, by looking at this, I can see it is a little bit blue. It's not this blue. So maybe I'll go in here and I'll bring it down, take it down a notch. It doesn't matter too much what color it is, as long as you're in the ballpark at this point. And then I'm going to deselect, oops, select, deselect. And I'm gonna, now I need to transform it because your shadow shouldn't be directly behind you. I need to put the shadow down here somewhere. So I can come up here to my move tool and I can show my transform controls. That gives me that bounding box. And if I bring my cursor near the corner, it gives me the double-ended curved arrow. And I can start to twirl it and get it kind of lining up with in the same direction as their shadows. Remember, you've got to approve those transformations. So you can press the check mark, you can press the enter key. I don't like seeing the bounding box, so I'm going to turn that back off as I'm working. And I'm going to turn the layer back on that I'm in so that I can work on lining this up a little bit better. So this is still in no way looking anywhere realistic, right? So I need to do some adjustment. I need to bring this down, maybe something like that. I also need to, the next few things you don't have to do in any particular order, but I need to lower the opacity. So the opacity, something that is opaque, you cannot see through. The opposite of opaque is transparent, which is see-through. And in between is translucent. So we need to make this a little bit more translucent by lowering the opacity. It's over here in your layers palette. And it's just a slider bar. And now it's starting to look a little bit more shadow-like. It's a little bit funky because I'm like the shadow's over the stroller and it's still not quite in the right position. It's still not quite the right shape and color, but we're getting there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to match, like I'm looking out here and trying to match the opacity of their shadow. Don't look at it where it's overlapping because that is going to be kind of a false, and then it's doubled up there, right? Now getting closer, but I feel like I still need to adjust the shape and size of my shadow a bit. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do some more complicated transforming by going to Edit, Transform, and you can play around with any of these. Like, have fun with it, see what happens. I know for a fact that I need to change the perspective of this because this is, I was just going to point at my computer screen. This is a flat surface, or relatively flat. So I need to send this shadow back in space a little bit. Whoa, whoa, well, yeah. Shadow's getting a little bit weird. Well, we'll say that that's good. And you can keep going into that transform control. I'm going to go into warp. Warp gives you the most, I don't know, it's the least constrained, I guess. So I want to make sure that there's a shadow over here behind this leg. Let me pull this down. And this is a point where I want to point out that this doesn't have to be 100% realistic. We're creating an illusion here. So I don't really need the rest of this shadow. All I really need to make this convincing is the shadow of my legs. So I'm just going to erase the rest of the shadow. It's just, I don't need it. I don't need it for the image to be believable. So I'm going to use the eraser tool. Remember, again, you can change the size of that brush. I'm going to keep it nice and big because I'm taking away a lot of material. Oops, I went too far. All right, I would say that that's a pretty believable shadow. The only thing that I am unhappy with the shadow itself on the ground is the color. This is more blue, and this has more green in it. It's okay if you're not able to identify those colors, but if you can see that they're not matching, then think about how you might change that. And because I'm thinking, oh, they're two different colors, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make a hue and saturation adjustment level because hue refers to color. And again, I wanted to only adjust the shadow, so I'm going to do the little holding the Option key or Alt key and clicking. And then I'm just going to play with this slider bar. Whoa, that's not right. Whoa, what's happening? Oh, that is the sweet spot right there. And then I can desaturate it a little bit. Nice. And now it's a little bit too light, so I'll come back up here to the opacity and I'll bump that up just a tad. And now it's pretty close. Being the perfectionist that I am, I would probably go in there and tweak it a little bit more, but that would make for a really boring video. This gives you the basic shadow possibilities. Now, remember that I was talking about the burn tool earlier, and something that's missing because I erased my whole shadow over the stroller and the kid is that there should be a little bit more shadow on this side of the stroller. So this is a great spot to use that burn tool. So I'll come back down to my background copy and I'm going to use the burn tool. And I'm just going to, well, I do not want 100% exposure. Bring that back down to around 50. And really subtly go over this side of the stroller and this side of the kid. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want it to look weird. You want it to look natural. You want it to look like, oh, there's a little bit of a shadow being cast, right? And honestly, I might even go over some of myself here with a little bit of the burn tool. Ooh, gotta make sure I'm in that layer. Oh, that's a little bit weird. Whoa, that got too far. Again, you can adjust your exposure so that it's less extreme of an adjustment. I think I took it too far, so I'm going to step backwards. We're going to leave it at that for now. I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to show you the one that I did spend a little bit more time on. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Turn that on. Turn that on. What's that? Oh. So this is the one I spent a little bit more time on. It's actually pretty much the same thing. I think the color is a little bit better in the shadow. So voila, I think it's a fairly believable combination of photographs. It was really hard to find a photograph for my background, but I'm really pleased with this one. The other thing that you may be interested in, and I didn't come across very many photographs that would require this, like many background Paris photographs, but there are some like rainy afternoon photographs. You may want to create a little bit of a reflection, and you can use really similar techniques to do that. So let's come over here to this file. Whoop. And here you can see it's a rainy day in Paris. I did not go out and make a separate photograph of myself for this. But obviously this one doesn't, you know, the lighting doesn't match, my outfit doesn't match, but let's say everything did, but I needed to add a little bit of reflection. What you can do, again, you can get your marching ants back around yourself, and instead of filling that with the paint bucket tool, you can copy and paste. So I'm edit, copy, edit, paste, and now I've got two of me. Whoop, repetition. I can use the transform controls to flip myself upside down, my reflection self. Then I can lower that opacity so that we can see the sidewalk through there. And you would want to do a little bit more work with some adjustment layers because, you know, this is not the same color as this reflection. Again, you're really wanting to reference what's already there. And once you've gotten there, something that really helps with reflections is the smudge tool. It may be hidden underneath the blur tool, but it looks like a finger. And you can come in and you can create some soft smudges that make it look a little bit more watery. You know, and this is maybe not the most effective reflection that I've ever done, but you can see where it's starting to get there. And if you spend a little bit more time with the smudge tool, again, you can adjust the size of the brush. You could even do that little trick that I showed you the other day with the rubber stamp tool. And so there's actually raindrops in here. So I could even take some of those raindrops with the rubber stamp tool and, you know, just like this ring here, get a larger brush. Well, it worked, but it's very subtle. What if we take something from over here? So now you're starting to get those puddle rain droplet patterns in there. Again, just adding to the believability. And just for fun, let me show you a couple trial and errors that I went through earlier. If we go back to the original here, I tried putting myself in this garden, but I realized that the light wasn't right. And actually the original, do you notice a difference between this one and this one? I'm flipped. That's one of the transform tools that you can do. You can flip horizontal. So I was like, well, maybe the light is coming from, and then I was like, yeah, no, the light is more like coming from almost the photographer's perspective or more up high. Anyways, the light wasn't right. That's the point. Then I put myself here at the Louvre with this team. I don't know what they're doing. But again, there was just like something not quite right. The light wasn't right. See, like he doesn't have a shadow here and I do. You know, I probably could have worked on it a little bit. I probably could have given him a false shadow. But again, like in the end, I decided it was not worth that work. And then the last funny one that I did was this one. I just like totally photobombed this nice evening time photograph from a fashion blog. I was like, yeah. But again, the lighting wasn't quite right. I felt there were some perspective issues between the photograph of myself and the background photograph, and ultimately decided that that wasn't going to be as effective as this background photograph. So if at the time of you watching this video, you have not uploaded your photographs of yourselves, please do that as soon as you can, because the rest of the class can't get started without those. Currently, there's only one photograph in there and it's of me. Don't use that one. Get your photographs up there. Find good background images. It doesn't have to be iconic Paris. It doesn't have to be the Eiffel Tower. It can be a completely mundane photograph of Paris. And it, you know, if you found it under a Google search for Paris, we're going to say it's from Paris. You can find it on like a real estate website or something. Just make sure, don't take any photographs from a photographer's website. So if you come across things that are photographs that are for sale, or it's like clearly an artist's site, just steer clear of those, just out of respect. I'm not worried about us getting in trouble for copyright or anything, but because this is classwork. But I think it's a respect thing. So how is that different than taking someone else's family vacation photograph? I guess it's a fine line, but use your common sense. And if you have any questions about it, of course, you can email me, and have fun with it. This is difficult, so make sure you give yourself plenty of time to work on it. And if you start to get frustrated or bleary-eyed, walk away for a little bit, go take a walk. And if you get too frustrated, don't be afraid to give up on an image and go find a different one. I mean, I went through 4 different photographs before I was finally ready to like actually put the time in. Don't go too far down a rabbit hole trying to fix something that you know in your heart of hearts isn't going to work. And again, like I said, have fun with it. Maybe we will next semester print them out at Walgreens or something as 4x6 prints and put them in a photo album. And then you can come by and visit them in the art building. Okay, that's it. Good luck. Have fun. I will see you next time.